Well, everyone, we get to finally talk about the iPhone 10 and see how it's going to hold up in 2023. Now, with this iPhone, I'm going to go ahead and try my best to kind of predict the future of this iPhone for the remainder of this year. It's going to be kind of a controversial year, I think, for the iPhone 10, and I'll explain why in this video. But looking back at 2022 in general, I think the iPhone 10 held up very well. I think, with it being kind of the lowest supported iPhone right now, I think it does kind of look good on Apple to kind of still be supporting this phone. If they discontinue this phone this year, I think that would be very sad. But I think the iPhone 10, when it comes down to the hardware itself, it held up very well against phones like the Galaxy S22, the iPhone 14s, especially with the iPhone SE3, the new budget offering from, Apple. I think the iPhone 10 holds up very, very well against those iPhones. Now, if you want to buy some phones I would recommend this year, I'll leave some phones linked in the description. You can get them from there, and you can help support the channel at the same time. Now, in this, specific iPhone, I think Apple did a tremendous job back in 2017 when they initially dropped this iPhone. It had that very, very beautiful 5.8-inch Super Retina OLED display. This was the first time we saw an OLED display on an iPhone, and since then, it's held up very well. Interestingly enough, I have tons of, phones in general that came out in 2017 and even past 2017, like 2018, 2019, and a lot of those phones have some burn-in on those displays. The iPhone 10, for a few iPhone 10s that I have, pretty much never had any burn-in. I have one iPhone 10 that does have burn-in, but I did buy it with burn-in on it because it was just significantly cheaper. It was a pretty good deal. In this case, my personal iPhones never really got any burn-in on the display, and with this one being the first OLED one, Apple did a pretty decent job at the time. It's also the first iPhone to have Face ID, and since then, it's still been holding up very well. It's gotten updates after update after update, and now, we can get Face ID in many different angles, and the iPhone 10 was the first one to originate it. Now, on top of that, we have the lightning port at the bottom, which, is very, very cool. You have this aluminum stainless steel side, which looks just so beautiful for sure. And on the back, we have that complete glass back, which looks beautiful. I think having a phone like this, especially nowadays, still makes this thing feel so premium. If Apple kept doing that aluminum back and everything like that, it definitely would have been feeling a little bit cheaper than, the glass back. So I'm glad they kept it and kept making the glass back, because they could have easily went from the iPhone 4S to the iPhone 5, from the glass back to the aluminum again. So I'm glad they didn't do that in this specific case. We also have that dual camera setup, which I'll talk about in a second. It's the wide and telephoto lens. And overall, when I hold this phone in the hand, even now in 2023, it still feels like such a premium phone. It still feels very good. I don't think really this phone's ever going to feel outdated, and this is more in line with something like an iPhone 4 in my opinion. I think since then, this has probably been the most impactful iPhone of all time. I think somewhere like the 13 Pro and 14 Pro could probably end up being a little bit more impactful over time, but I think the iPhone 10 did a tremendous job at that moment. I also want to throw in one other thing. The gesture-based design that this iPhone ended up bringing, which is basically the lack of home button and just having those gestures all over the place, makes this phone feel so much more futuristic than the iPhone SEs, than any of the home button iPhones in general. Even a lot of Android phones, I'll kind of, say, whenever I use the gestures on an iPhone, which this iPhone also, has, it just makes this phone feel so smooth. And even though this phone has a 60 Hz panel, sometimes I get the impression that it could feel like a 90 Hz screen as well, which is honestly pretty weird. So I think the iPhone 10, Apple did a great job with it. And when I look at this iPhone going into 2023, I'm just hoping Apple just doesn't do anything dumb with a specific iPhone. Now, on top of that, with that camera setup, I think Apple did a great job here too. We have that 12 megapixel wide angle lens, 12 megapixel telephoto lens, and a 7 megapixel standard lens on the front. Now, luckily for us, we can do 4K at 60 on the back, and we can do 1080p at 30 on the front. And I will say this is probably going to be one of the more, not controversial, but one of the more areas of this phone where I'm just not the number one fan of. I think back in 2017, it was a pretty competitive camera, especially when you compare it to the, direct competitors that had the Pixel 3, I think at the time, or Pixel 2, and also the Galaxy S8. But I will say, in this day and age, the camera has definitely been a little bit dated. I find this camera to be, not only lacking in features like cinematic video and the telephoto lens and no 4K at 60 on the front, but also things like the graininess in these photos. Sometimes these photos just don't really look that great. And with the lack of the ultra-wide sensor, I don't know, I feel like this camera, in this day and age, it wasn't a bad camera when it first came out, but these phones just get old over time. That's kind of how it happens. And technology has improved so much since. So of course this camera isn't going to be as great as it used to be, but I'll still say for a 2017 phone, it's holding up quite well. If you're trying to take basic photos and videos and whatnot, you're probably going to be fine. But if you try to take it up a notch and you start taking videos, like you're wanting cinematic quality videos, you might want to upgrade your phone if you want a better camera, to be honest. So that pretty much covers it up there. Now another thing I want to hit on is the software and the longevity of this iPhone. So like I mentioned, this is going to be one of the more controversial aspects of this iPhone this year. I don't know if it's going to be getting iOS 17. I have no insider information. If I had to take a look back though, I was surprised when the iPhone 7 got discontinued last year in 2022. So Apple could go ahead and do the same thing this year. I wouldn't put it past Apple to discontinue this iPhone this year, but I also would probably think that, maybe they don't want these iPhones to go away just yet, and they may end up supporting this iPhone probably for the next year or two. So I would say if you're planning on getting this phone, at least know in the back of your head that even if it gets discontinued with iOS 16, at least Apple is probably still going to be supporting this iPhone with software updates, probably with security updates for the next year or so on top of it. So you probably have like another year and a half from me making this video. If you're watching this like way later on in the year, probably June of 2024, that's probably when this iPhone could end up getting discontinued. So that covers it up there. In the performance side, this iPhone had that Apple A11 Bionic chip inside with 3GB of RAM. Now, a funny thing about this iPhone is, since I got this iPhone back in 2017, then I got it again, I think in 2018, this has been a very good performing iPhone for the most part. And the reason for that, again, is that gesture-based design. Before we even hit on the actual gaming performance and all that, anytime I've ever done anything with this iPhone, it has been there and it's been a very dependable product for me. The gesture-based design, I know I've talked about it like 15 times in this video already, but it is really it's such an important aspect of this iPhone. I feel like Apple did such a great job with it back then, and I'm just so happy with how they've still been able to go ahead and improve that gesture-based design just year after year. Now that's enough of that. I will say in the raw performance segment, it's still a pretty good performing iPhone. I use this iPhone almost every day for videos on my second and third channel. So I'll go ahead and just make, a quick tutorial on this iPhone, or it's just a gaming video related video on the third channel. And this iPhone holds up very well. If I play games like Call of Duty Mobile or PUBG, which I don't really play that much anymore, but mostly Genshin Impact, these games run pretty well. The phone does get kind of hot, and the battery life isn't as great as it used to be. It's gotten improved with iOS 16 though, but I still think the performance of this iPhone is still very good for the most part for how old this phone is. Now it is substantially slower than an iPhone 14 Pro, it's slower than an iPhone 13, it's slower than an iPhone 11, so I don't want to give the impression that this iPhone is, a super fast iPhone. You're definitely getting what you paid for, but it is surprisingly fast depending on what you're going to do with your product. In my opinion, like with my iPhone 13 Pro, if I had to go back to an iPhone 10, I would feel perfectly fine with it. I think the performance here is more than enough for me, and it is a pretty good performing phone when it comes down to it still. But just keep in mind, if you're wanting the most, if you're wanting a phone that's way better in performance, you may want to go for the iPhone XS. That is a little bit more expensive and it's a newer product, and it's not better in every area, but it is a better iPhone than the iPhone 10 overall, even in the performance segment. So in terms of that kind of covers it up there. And to answer the question, is the iPhone 10 still worth it in 2023? I'll probably tell you, yeah, I think this iPhone is still completely worth it this year. I will say if things change like, mid-year when iOS 17 comes out and the iPhone 10 is no longer supported, then obviously things will change and I'll, update this review when it happens. But I think this iPhone is still a pretty good iPhone for sure. These used prices of these iPhones have gone down to like less than $200. So I don't think you can go wrong with buying this iPhone, but if you have a little bit more money to spend, an iPhone 11 Pro is a solid iPhone you can keep for a very long time. And there's a few other iPhones out there too that are way better, like the iPhone 12, 12 Pro, 13, 13 Pro. But I think the iPhone 10 is pretty good when it comes down to it. So that pretty much covers it up. If you have any other thoughts or questions, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.